first of all, on behalf of the whole Toronto Global Forum, congratulations. Congratulations on your re-election. I am also an elector in the University of Rosedale. Congratulations on the re-election. Congratulations, of course, on the reappointment or continued appointment as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. I was telling Chrystia how lucky she is that she didn't have to stay by the phone very long after the election. I mean, any minister would know how terrifying those long hours are. But it is certainly a great mark of her contribution to the government and the Prime Minister's recognition that she's an essential part of his team. So as we emerge from this pandemic, what do you see as the key ingredients and the building blocks for our future prosperity and our success here in Canada?
Okay, wow, starting with an easy question, Pierre. Let me just say a couple of things by way of introduction before diving in. So the first one is to say to Doug, thank you for that very nice introduction. Fortunately, I am the mother of teenagers, so whenever kind introductions like that maybe make you a little bit arrogant, I just go home and I learn from my teenagers all of my flaws. It's good, it's a good balance. And I do want to say one thing about Pierre Pettigrew, who is here having a conversation with me, that I was just thinking about ahead of this event. And that is Pierre, as he has said, is another person who lives in my riding. And by the way, I bet there are a lot of University Rosedale residents here. So let's consider this also a constituency event. And thanks for the time we're spending together. Yay, best riding in Canada. But so I got to know Pierre in the by-election in 2013. And then when we formed government in 2015 and the Prime Minister appointed me as Trade Minister, I thought, hey, I know someone who's been Trade Minister. And I don't know if Pierre remembers, but I invited him to come have a coffee in my house. It was in the days you were still allowed to do that. And he gave me a lot of pieces of advice, but one thing that he said to me really became a North Star for me, and it's something that would never appear in briefing books. He explained to me how he built a relationship with Bob Zoellick, who was USTR at the time. And Bob Zoellick turns out to be a very keen military historian. And so Pierre brilliantly invited him to Quebec City and gave him a tour of some of those wonderful spots in military history and built a personal relationship that way. And I had been a minister for like 5 minutes before I had this conversation with Pierre, and I didn't really know you were kind of allowed to do that. You know, I can tell you, the public servants, they don't tell you to do that. But it was very inspiring for me. And that was one of the ideas, Pierre, and I want to say publicly thank you to you, that really has guided me in all of the jobs I've done. Just to remember, your counterparty is a human being also. And if you can build that human rapport, it's going to be a lot easier, maybe especially when you have difficult things to negotiate. So yay, Pierre, thank you very much. Okay, so Canada, economy, prosperity, what do we need to do? I won't say everything we need to do because I'd be talking for 5 hours, but let me hit a few of the highlights. The first one is we have to finish the fight against COVID. So if there's anyone here who hasn't been double vaccinated, please get up and leave now and walk out of the room and go get your second shot. And if you haven't had your first shot, why are you here? And all of us who have kids under 12, let's get ready for them to be vaccinated. All of us who are eligible for a booster, let's get that booster. I was talking to my dad, who's in Alberta over the weekend. He's 77, he's had his booster. It's a relief to me. He had cancer not this past summer, but the summer before. I'm so glad to know. So, you know, as finance minister, I can tell you, nothing worries me more than a failure to keep COVID under control. And we have done, I would say, a pretty good job as a country. I think collectively we probably don't give ourselves as much credit as we ought to do. But when I compare our performance to our G7 peers, and it's really a collective effort, we've done pretty well. But let's finish the fight. So that, like, overwhelmingly is the single biggest thing. And I start there because we can't take our eye off that ball. Okay, having said that, what else do we need? I really think that today we need to have an unrelenting, and I would say kind of renewed vigor around a Canadian drive for jobs and growth. We have avoided really deep economic scarring through COVID. We've learned some lessons of past recessions, and we have very strong jobs numbers now. We've recovered, more than recovered, all the jobs lost to COVID, so that's good. But we all know it's been a blow, and we have to recover from that. And I think we all also know the green transition is a huge mountain we're going to have to climb together. Someone who I have become who has become a partner who I admire a lot in the world is Olaf Scholz, who's currently the German finance minister, will very likely become chancellor soon. And he was actually one of the people who made CETA, our trade deal with Europe, possible. That's how I got to know him when he was mayor of Hamburg. And he has described to me the enormity of the green transition in a way that I think is really true, which is that this is the biggest transformation of industrial economies since the Industrial Revolution itself. That's huge, and I think it is accurate. So that's a lot we have to do. And in order to do that all successfully, I think we all need to be really, really focused on jobs and on economic growth, on an economy that is robustly getting bigger and bigger every year. Now, I'm saying that to you guys because mostly that's your job. I worked for the Financial Times long enough that it is very, very clear to me that the biggest drivers of jobs and growth are all of you. And one data point that I look at very closely is private business investment. And I want that number to be high. I want all of you to have the ideas and the confidence in Canada that you're investing and you're betting on future growth and you're driving it. But I do believe that we as a government can help you. We can help create some of the frameworks and we can facilitate that investment that I really want you to be making. What are a few of the things that I think we can do to do that? Well, one of them is childcare. I really believe that one of the ballot issues in the election we have just gone through was early learning and childcare. There was a clear contrast between our government's position and the Conservative Party's position, and we won. And what that means is Canadians have voted for a national system of early learning and childcare, $10 a day in 5 years, 50% reduction by the end of next year. And that, look, of course it's a social policy. I'm a feminist. My mother was one of those Canadian women, yes, in Northern Alberta, who, when the Royal Commission on the Status of Women came out with its report just over 50 years ago, was excited and started fighting for it. So I believe in this as a feminist issue, but I'm finance minister too, and I really believe in it as economic policy. Our economists at the Department of Finance calculated that once we have this system in place, it will be the biggest driver of growth in Canada since the NAFTA free trade agreement. And Pierre is now a proud University Rosedale resident, yay, but he has been a Quebec MP. And so he can tell us all that, this is not a theory that early learning and childcare drives growth and drives GDP. It is what the Quebec experience has shown. TD did a report where they estimated that every dollar invested in early learning and childcare delivers between $1.5 to $2.8 in economic returns. So that's something we can do. We have the political mandate. We will get it done. A second thing that I think we can really do to drive growth in Canada, and this I think is a uniquely Canadian growth strategy, is we're one of the few countries in the world, maybe really the only country, the only wealthy country in the world, that truly welcomes immigrants. And I think that is fantastic because I love the kind of country and society that makes us. But I can also tell you that is a fantastically powerful driver of economic growth in our country, particularly as we are seeing, and we're going to see this more and more in the coming years, demographic challenges in the rest of the industrialized West. In order for us to be a successful immigrant society and a society that can continue to welcome immigrants, we need places for them to live. And so something that I am going to be very, very focused on in the coming months, our government will be very focused on, is housing. This is something that I think is a key challenge for Canadians. And, I want you to know that the federal government, working with provinces, working with cities, is really going to be putting our shoulder to the wheel to drive housing affordability. And for me, first and foremost, that means supply, supply, supply. So, Doug mentioned that I am a proud daughter of Alberta, and I really am. And my family actually, in my lifetime, actually homesteaded, because I'm from that far north. There was still some land available to clear into homestead. My dad has this huge breaking plow manufactured in Vegreville. So that Canadian history is very close to me. And, we built Canada through homesteads, through land that was through immigrants who homesteaded and built our country. And yeah, we did. And we need to continue to do that, except instead of a quarter section, we need to be sure that there's an affordable house for new Canadians and for young Canadian families. And I just have tremendous confidence that if the government is there to build that infrastructure, to maintain that affordability for young Canadian families, for the new Canadians who are coming here and who we are uniquely able to welcome, we are going to see that really deliver in terms of being an energetic, growing, entrepreneurial society. And then one quick final point. On the green transition, I don't think that happens by itself. I think it's important for government to set a framework and to create conditions that encourage the kind of risky investments and innovations I'm counting on all of you guys to make and come up with. Our price on pollution is such an important driver of that. And I can tell you it is admired around the world as the most economically efficient driver of climate action. So we have that. But I also do believe we need to be there and invest alongside all of you in that green transition. We need to help take off some of that risk edge. And that's something I'm very excited with my colleagues, Stephen Guilbeault, Jonathan Wilkinson, to work with all of you on. I could say a lot more, but I see time is running out.
Thank you so much. During the pandemic, we have seen the government playing a much enhanced role from the past. We've seen in pretty much all of the OECD countries a wild experiment in social spending. I've been very impressed by how much childcare has emerged as a significant issue in that election. I was part of the Paul Martin government and the Ken Dryden proposal on childcare. I wish we had done so well at that time with this childcare proposal. But you are quite right that these social programs and this enhanced role for the government are way beyond social, but are very, very much economic, beyond the right thing to do. Canadians are more focused now on their quality of life issue. How do you see this enhanced role of the government continue to play in the future for this quality of life, where so many Canadians are reassessing how they want to live their life, work life, personal life? And how do you see where the government should step up? But I also see the pressures like around protectionism and nationalism in trade that both you and I have been resisting a great deal. So there's a fine role where government should step in and what government should resist the pressures to step in.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think the most important thing, Pierre, is to get that balance right. And it is certainly true that during COVID, we stepped up and took unprecedented action. More than $289 billion spent by the Government of Canada on income and business supports. And that was money well spent. I am 100% confident of that. We really avoided economic scarring. We avoided, a collapse of our businesses, and we avoided deep, deep poverty because we did an astonishing thing as a society. We decided to shut our economy down to save lives. And that was a big decision to take. And I know I am so confident it was the right decision to take. I think going forward, the important thing for government is to be very clear about where are the areas where the government is uniquely positioned to invest and improve the lives of Canadians and help to drive economic growth. And where are the areas where actually the government is really, really bad at getting involved and where it should be all of you who are the drivers of jobs and growth. And at a very human level, I had an experience that I am sure few people in this room share, which is as a student, I actually lived in the actual Soviet Union. And I can really recommend that life experience to give a person a real appreciation of the market economy and the amazing things the private sector delivers. I have never been so happy in my life as on my first visit to a drugstore after like a couple of months in the Soviet Union. Toothpaste, tampons, just remarkably wonderful that you could just walk in and buy these things. So I have a sharp personal appreciation that there's a lot of stuff that government is very bad at doing. And those things I think the government shouldn't do. But I also really believe that we can and we have an obligation to provide the infrastructure that Canadians, both the ones who are here now and the new Canadians who are coming, need in order to have great lives and be fantastic business people. What is that infrastructure? It is affordable housing. It is effective public transit and cities that work. It is trade corridors so we can move our stuff around our huge and wonderful country. And it is also social infrastructure. So it is early learning and childcare. It is the Canada Child Benefit. It is our amazing national healthcare system. I mean, how grateful should we all be to all Canadian healthcare workers? And how wonderful is it that any of us who had the misfortune of getting COVID, or, like my dad, getting sick during COVID, not a single one of us has ever had to worry about going bankrupt because of that. That is such a powerful thing. So we need to have that infrastructure. I think we have some work to do on ensuring we have skills infrastructure. And one of the things we invested in heavily in the budget was in young Canadians, in helping them pay for their education. I think we should do more there. And I think there is more for us to do in ensuring that Canadians have the skills they need for the economy we have today. I'm thinking particularly of the skilled trades. And again, here, we're not doing too badly compared to the world. Talk to a British or American minister about truck drivers, for example, and you will suddenly feel really glad to be Canadian. But there is a lot more that we can do to be sure that, I think the government can really help close that mismatch between jobs and the skills that people have. So that's Pierre, what I would say about, we have to be quite disciplined about thinking about where does the government need to do more. And top of my list is more on housing, more on ensuring we have the supply of housing Canadians need. You guys are all businessy people, so I'm sure you read the Scotiabank study from last year that talked about the real housing gap we have. And governments need to do more to close that. But there are also lots of other areas where our focus should be on talking to you guys, listening to you guys, being sure we provide you with the supportive policies you need, but also, frankly, getting out of the way.
Well, thank you so much, Chrystia. You've already talked about COP26, the importance of moving towards a transition. I find that this COP26 has been helpful in that it seems to be less black and white, the solutions, and realize that we have to make some compromises and some more subtle adjustment towards this. And so thank you for calling our attention. We only have 2 minutes left, and I'd really like to hear your views on the geopolitics at this time. You were foreign minister. How do you see, around multilateralism, whether we're talking COP26, whether we're talking WTO reform, the rule of law, that is so important for a country our size. But there's this rise of nationalism, and it is everywhere, this rise of nationalism. And with this rise of nationalism, where do you see the future of multilateralism, which is so important for our promotion of our values and our own prosperity?
That is a great question, Pierre, and a hard one. And I will tell you, over the past, 10 days, I went to a G20 summit in Rome, and then the COP26. And then shortly before that, we had the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington. So the finance ministers of the world, we've been hanging out a bit. And I'm not going to name names, but at one of the suppers over the course of one of these meetings, one of the ministers was talking to a table of ministers about these big challenges, very similar, the key issues are remarkably similar around the world. And this minister said, well, guys, my answer to this is the democracies that all of you have really just don't work. This was not a minister from a democracy. But his basic point was the way we do things works better than the way you guys do things. And this person put it as starkly and directly as that. And, when I think about the challenge that the rules-based world order and multilateralism is facing, I think the root issue is this question that a lot of societies are asking themselves about, is my democracy working? Is my democracy delivering for people? And, I feel remarkably lucky to be Canadian, because I think ours is one of the healthiest democracies in the world. And yeah. And that is the result of the work of all of us. But I think we shouldn't take it for granted. And I would say, the first job when it comes to preserving multilateralism is make sure we're standing on a secure foundation. And for me, a secure Canadian foundation is a Canada with a strong and healthy democracy, where the overwhelming majority of Canadians feel the society works for them, and where we do have economic growth, because that's one of the things that makes people feel the society is working for them. But it has to be inclusive economic growth. So for me, that's where we start. I think we do need to work hard to build alliances with like-minded countries, and I think we are doing that. And we do have to be prepared, to have sharp elbows when our elbows need to be sharp. Like, the only people who are going to take care of Canada are Team Canada. And sometimes sometimes the best defense is a strong offense. I think we all know that. And we do, as a government, as a country, need to be prepared, to push back in defense of the national interest where that is required.
Well, thank you so very much. I'm afraid this is all the time we have today, but thank you so very much for having joined us, Chrystia. Much appreciated.